A little bit of a shift happening this morning as we get into Matthew 6. And I want to start with a question. And I want you to answer it honestly, and but not out loud. This is one of those questions. Don't answer it out loud. When you do something good, genuinely good, something kind, something generous, does it tweak you a little bit if nobody notices that you did that? Some of y'all laughed. See, you answered out loud when you laughed. Here's what I've learned about my own heart. Sometimes I want credit. Not always, but there's a part of me that sometimes when I do something good, especially if it's something extra, I want to be seen a little bit. I want a little recognition. But y'all know we live in a moment right now where literally, feeds that instinct, because we built an entire culture around the visible good deed. You've seen the videos. Somebody buys a meal for somebody in need, or leaves a big tip for the waitress, and the camera's rolling the whole time. They make sure they film this receipt and get it framed just right. Sometimes I always ask, who's holding the camera, right? And these videos that are not staged. Like, boy, that is the perfect camera angle in this unstaged video. That's amazing. That security camera guy knew exactly where to put that camera. It's amazing. What's happened is we've turned generosity into content. We've created platforms where the payoff for doing good is that the whole world gets to watch it. And I got to be honest with y'all, I really like those videos. Some of them are legitimate. They're not staged in the sense of they set somebody up and it's like a pretend person. They're literally trying to help somebody in need. And they're feel-good videos. They're wholesome videos. And I like those kinds of things. I've loved this week watching Europeans and the Japanese discover how awesome America is. It's reminded me not only that America is great, it's reminded me why it's great. And it's been probably for me one of the most fun social media weeks I've had in a long time. But in reality, what's happened with these feel-good videos is the internet took a microphone to something that's been living in the human heart for way, way longer than we've had smartphones. And that's what Jesus is going to address this morning in Matthew 6, verses 1 through 4. And I want us to read that together. He says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you." So let me set the scene as we get into this chapter. Because chapter 6, Jesus is going to shift his focus in this sermon. So for several weeks, we've been working through chapter 5, and Jesus has shown us a righteousness that goes deeper than the Pharisees ever imagined. He's taken us past murder to anger. He's taken us past adultery to lust. He's talked about our words, our oaths, our enemies, and praying for our enemies and those kind of things. Chapter 5 has been about the shape of a heart that's made new. But when we get to chapter 6, he's now not just talking about what we do. He starts getting into motivations. He starts talking about why we do it. And he does that in 3 examples, and they lined up back to back, giving in verse 2 through 4, praying in verses 5 through 15, and fasting in verses 16 through 18. 3 of the most basic acts of devotion that a believer can do. But before he gets into any of them, he hangs one sentence over all of them, and that's the verse 1. So the question is never whether your good gets seen. The question Jesus presents is, who do you want to see it? True righteousness seeks the approval of the Father rather than the praise of people. And so let's walk through and look at the text in Matthew 6. And the first thing we need to think of is that we need to decide whose eyes you live for. So go back to verse 1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. Notice the first word is beware. Not consider, not be aware. there's a warning. Beware. It's like warning somebody that there's a downed power line or the bridge is out ahead. And right here, what makes this so dangerous, the reason this is a warning, is what he's warning us about hides inside the good stuff. It hides inside your righteousness. Jesus is not warning about your worst moments here in this text. He's warning about your best moments. The very things that look like devotion that turn into performance. And look at the phrase he uses. He says, in order to be seen by them. That little phrase is the diagnosis. That's the whole text in 5 words. So the question drops, whose eyes are you living for? Because every one of us is performing for somebody. You are, I am. We all carry an audience around in our heads all day long. And so Jesus says, be careful whose eyes you choose to perform for. Now, I hope at this point, right? We went through chapter 5. So I hope at this point, all of you are asking the question to yourself, but Pastor Scott, didn't Jesus just say earlier in chapter 5, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven? Y'all were all thinking that, right? Did y'all all miss that sermon? It just wasn't that good of a sermon, apparently. All right. In chapter 5, Jesus says, let people see your good works. And then in chapter 6, he says, don't let anybody see your good works. And there is a seeming contradiction there, right? Because the words on the page look like a contradiction, but I want you to look. This is the beautiful thing. The moment you see them side by side, this is the reason I put them on the slide like this, you begin to see how the answer jumps off the page, because look at each one is aimed. In chapter 5, good works are seen, and the people who see the good works end up glorifying the Father. But in chapter 6, so that's an arrow pointing up in chapter 5. In chapter 6, the arrow starts its way up, and then it kind of loops around and points back right here. Now, if I was better with PowerPoint, I would have done those arrows and made it point and all those things, but I was like, that's going to take more time, and nobody cares, right? And so what you have is you have the same visibility, but a different target. In chapter 5, your light shines so that God gets the credit. In chapter 6, Jesus says, you don't need to be the one shining so that you get the credit. So the whole sermon's not about getting good at hiding your good deeds. Don't mistake that. Don't think, I got to go away and make sure nobody ever sees anything good I ever do ever. It's about getting honest about your intention. About who are you bringing glory to, yourself or God? You can do the most public act possible and bring God glory, or it could be the most private good deed you've ever done and it still be performance. Because it's about intention and motivation. And he gives you a reason at the end of verse 1, and it's sobering. He says, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Hold on to that word reward, because we're going to get there in a minute. But so here's the foundation of the whole sermon. Before you ever get $1, pray a word, ask who's your audience. Decide today, whose eyes are you living for? Now, Jesus moves from verse 1 to verse 2. He gives us an example. What we see here is paid with applause. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets, that they may be praised by others. I love how Jesus teaches. He doesn't just leave us floating in the realm of theoretical. He literally says, let me give you an example. All right, let me show you what living for the wrong eyes actually looks like. It's like a man giving to the poor with a trumpet. You know exactly what Jesus means, right? We may not have our own trumpet, but we've got versions of trumpets. You know a man who he can't do a good deed without looking around and make sure everybody in the room knows it's about to happen. The gift that arrives with an announcement. Generosity that needs a soundtrack, or service that needs constant recognition. The trumpet, Jesus is revealing here is a heart that turns mercy into performance. And if you look closely at what Jesus is doing, because the word he uses here is intended to cut. He uses the word hypocrite. It's the word where we get, it's the Greek word where we get our word hypocrite. In the original language, the word is the word for a stage actor, but not just any stage actor. This is the stage actor that goes on stage wearing a mask. He says his lines, he plays his part, then he takes off the mask, goes home, because none of it was ever real. This is the word Jesus used. So Jesus looks at the man who's giving to the needy, giving to the poor with a trumpet, and he says, that's not a worshiper, that's an actor. He's reciting lines of generosity. He's learned the Christianese. He's learned the lingo. He knows what to say, but he's not playing for an audience of one. He's playing to get some credit. And the tragedy underneath it all is go look at who's supposed to be helped. The needy, the poor, the person standing with an empty hand. And in this trumpet kind of giving, the poor stops being the point. He becomes a prop, becomes the backdrop for performance that's really about the giver. So what ends up happening is you see mercy, but mercy gets hollowed out and it becomes about the human being in front of you, the actual person in need, the actual image bearer, becomes a tool that you use to feel good about yourself. And that's why Jesus is grieving here, and that's why he's warning. Now, look how the verse ends, because this is the line I really want you to feel. It says, truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. Now, this is a business word. This is the word stamped on a receipt. The bill is settled, paid in full, account closed, no further action required. You see what Jesus is saying? He's not saying if you do this, your reward, your heavenly reward is going to be smaller. He says, you got your reward. Good job. Good job. There you go. Go on. Move on. You paid an applause. He's saying the hypocrite gets the whole thing. They wanted to be seen, they're seen. They wanted applause. The applause came. Transaction complete. Receipt stamped. No further action required on the part of the Heavenly Father. There's nothing left for God to give him because he collected everything he was after. And in Matthew, the word lands again and again and again on the Pharisees. These are the men who wore religion like a costume, literal costume. But there was nothing changed in their heart. And for most of us in this room, this is kind of where, like, when I'm reading through this, it kind of bites, because if applause is a payment, and you take it from the crowd, you've cashed in your reward from the Father. And the hardest part is that in the moment, it feels like a pretty good trade-off. It feels like winning. Trumpet worked, people noticed. You walk away, you feel full. There's literally something called a giver's high. Did y'all know that? Literally, it's like a psychological condition called a giver's high. And the problem is the whole time, heaven's writing paid in full across your account. And that's the warning that Jesus has, because the applause pays you in full, but every time you do a good thing and go fishing for somebody to notice or drop a hint, or every time you walk in a mention of the gift you gave, you're cashing in an early reward. So when you feel that pull, notice it. Name it for what it is. Applause is not your reward arriving. It's actually your reward leaving. And then Jesus tells us in verses 3 and 4, says, give where only your Father can see. Now watch what Jesus does. So he's not going to leave us standing in the wave of the trumpet. He shows us the way to live. But when you give to the needy, Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. This is one of the lines that makes me smile, because Jesus uses this kind of exaggerated language multiple times through this passage. I mean, remove the plank from your own eye before you deal with the speck in the other person's eye, that kind of stuff, right? So listen, your hands are attached to your body, and you have one brain. Your left hand always knows what your right hand's doing, all right? So what's Jesus talking about here? This is the whole point. Jesus is saying a giving, a generosity of spirit that's so natural and so reflective and so free of self-congratulation that you do it and you don't even realize that that's what it is you're doing. It's just part of who you are. It would have never crossed your mind to be anything else but this level of generosity. Now listen, I got to tell y'all, this is a generosity that flows out of you before pride can get its hands on it. I wish I was this level of generous. I've met people that were this level of generous. If you look at the word Jesus reaches for at the end, he says, your Father sees in secret. He could have said, God sees in secret, the Lord sees in secret. He says your Father. And remember, as we're going through this Sermon on the Mount, you've started to realize how every single word has a gigantic meaning. Some of us hear God sees everything you do in secret. You've been told that growing up. God sees everything you do, boy. Make sure, It's like, all right, thanks, Dad. Now what? Right? Now I walk around terrified, God looking at me all the time. But God, no, this is not surveillance. This isn't God sitting up in heaven waiting on us for us to do something wrong or so he can zap us. This is the picture of a father watching a child, and the child doesn't even know he's being watched. A dad in a backyard watching his kid bounce a ball up against the wall. And the dad can't take his eyes off him. That's what Jesus is describing, the attention of a father who misses nothing because he loves watching his children. And the crowd missed your gift, but the Father didn't, because the Father sees every good deed you've ever done. He always does. And it turns out to be the very thing your heart should be chasing the whole time, and that's the reward. Now, it's not hard to understand why applause is tempting. Because underneath all of us, part of us that's broken that will eventually be fully restored at salvation, but not fully restored, not until glory, is a desire, a hunger to be seen and known. Tim Keller puts a finger on it. He says, he talks about being loved, but not known is really a very superficial version of love. But to be fully known and truly loved is being loved by God. And that's the ache. And the Father offers you the thing the crowd never could. And what that is he sees you all the way down, the real you, in the dark room you, and he calls you his own anyway. The amazing thing is it's true that God does see everything we do, and he still loves us. Let me tell you something I've learned in this role. Been doing this 25 years at this church. One of the strange privileges of being a pastor is that every so often you become the one person that knows something that somebody did. A need comes up quietly in the church, and a family's about to lose something, or something's about to happen with someone, and before I can even figure out how to help, I get word that it's already been handled. It's already been covered. And then once in a while, I find out who did it. And almost always, I find out by accident or find out weeks later after it's already been taken care of. And nearly every time, if I approach the person and say to them, hey, look, I heard you did such and such, they almost always come back and say, hey, yeah, but I don't really want to share that I did that. Not because they're ashamed of it, just because that's not why they did it. I've watched people give amounts of money to church members that were struggling that I might find out weeks or months later that take my breath away. No trumpet, no announcement, no receipt staged for, social media. I found out something this week that a church member did that I thought was incredibly generous, and I had no idea it even happened. And I texted Will and I texted Brent and said, did y'all know about this? Like, yeah, I think I might have heard that, but I don't know for sure. If you want to know for sure, you're going to have to actually talk to this person. And at first I was like, should I have known that? But then I thought, I'm preaching this sermon this week. It's a good thing I didn't know that. They just did it. They heard of a need, and without even thinking said, I can meet that need. And did not think anything of it. Their left hand never knew what their right hand was doing. But someone saw, start to finish, the Father. And the reality is those quiet givers who have developed a version of generosity of spirit and heart that causes them to go, need, I can meet that need, and move on and never think again about it. Look at the promise Jesus attaches to it. Your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now there's the reward word again. It's been this passage twice. In verse 2, the hypocrite cashed out his reward in applause. The hypocrite got his reward from the crowd. The account's closed. But the one who gives in secret, the account's still open. Held by the Father who saw it, who settles it himself in his own time and in his own way. And he's going to hold on to that. And Jesus does not say that he might. He says your Father will reward you. Which means nothing that's ever done quietly for the glory of God is going to get lost. Not the check you wrote that nobody knows about, not the bill you paid for a family who will never find out it was even you, not the years you spent serving in a corner of this church where no one says thank you. Your Father saw every bit of it, and he keeps a better record than anyone else ever could. I'll give you an example, and y'all might not even think about this. 2 weeks ago, y'all took an offering for Ben Helton to go to I forget where he's going, Croatia? Kosovo, Croatia. It's all Eastern Europe, right? Y'all gave. You gave generously to help a young man that's been in this church for a long time and actually serving in this church a long time. Born here, actually. He'll never know which ones of y'all gave and which ones you didn't. You know why? We're not writing a letter and saying, here's the list of everybody that gave to you, Ben. Now, he might come and ask, I would like to write thank you letters to the people. And you know what I'm going to say? Just write one big thank you letter to everybody, and we'll just read it on a Sunday. Did any of y'all in the room go, man, I really want Ben to know I gave? Right? Now, y'all need to stop thinking about it right there, because then you might end up getting your reward. I'm just kidding, right? I didn't mean to set y'all up. Listen, the years I've spent serving this church and seeing people that serve week in, week out, and actually don't get enough thank yous, but I've never seen them stressed or upset about that, because it's not why they're serving. The Father sees every bit of that service, and he keeps a better record than anyone else ever could. And if you keep reading in this chapter, down to verse 19, you don't have to turn there, but he says, Do not store up treasure in heaven, where moth and rust destroy, but don't store up treasure on earth, where moth and rust don't destroy, but store up treasure in heaven. He's actually still on the same point. Now, I'm not going to preach that sermon. That's in a few weeks. But the trumpet stores treasure on earth, and applause disappears really quickly. But the secret gift stores treasure in heaven, where your Father is keeping you safe. So Jesus isn't asking you to give up a reward. He's showing you how to move your reward into something eternal. So learn to give where only the Father sees it. The only Father receives glory from it, even if somebody else sees it. And let that be enough. Because the dark, the hidden, is not where the reward disappears. It's actually where the Father keeps it. Now, I know that most of us have never been tempted to blow a trumpet before we give to the needy. And I don't think anybody in here's got a YouTube or Instagram or whatever social media page where you're, videoing yourselves feeding the homeless for clicks. And if you are, I hope you get 50 million followers and start tithing on that. But that does not mean we're free from what Jesus is talking about. So, because I think the temptation that hits close to home is this. Serving in a ministry and secretly hoping somebody notices how much you do for the church. Or you're the biggest giver in the church and nobody really even notices. Or you help the family in need. Boy, it would make you feel a little bit better if you got some kind of acknowledgement over that. Or you volunteer for something because we made an announcement up here that we need more workers in the nursery. And then you get up there and you realize it's really not all that great. And nobody gave you credit. Let me tell you what else will happen. It's very possible to preach a sermon and walk out of here and go, boy, not one person told me how good I did this morning. Teach a class, lead a Bible study, sing a song, the upfront stuff, and then check the room for approval. I needed that more in my life at one point than I do today. I don't need y'all to tell me I did a good job. It's encouraging when people point out something that spoke to them out of the sermons. Those are encouraging moments. But I don't need to be told, you did a really good job this morning, Pastor. My wife broke me of that by asking her, hey, how'd you think I did this morning? I'm like, It was all right. It wasn't your best, right? So I just stopped asking, and then eventually I just got to where I just stopped asking in general, right? That's what the good spouse is for. So I don't want to misconstrue, though, what's happening here in this passage. Jesus is not merely asking whether we did the right thing. He's asking what we wanted in return for doing the right thing. And if we're honest, many of us know exactly what it feels like when obedience goes unnoticed. Now, I think it's a good thing for us to encourage each other in our service, right? We're to encourage each other, challenge each other, spur each other to good works. But that's not the same thing as hoping for applause. Jesus is inviting us something that's better than applause. He's freeing us from the exhaustion of a need to be noticed, and he teaches us to do good, leave the results to the Father, to serve, and let that be enough that he saw, and give and let that be enough that he knows. And in reality, if we can get there, obedience becomes lighter, it becomes freer, it becomes actually more fun. Jesus offers a way out of the struggle for the applause, and it's mercy. He says, come do your righteousness before one set of eyes, just one. O.S. Guinness preached a famous sermon on this, literally called The Audience of One. That's why I named this sermon this morning after his sermon. Live your whole life in front of the Father and don't worry about the crowd. Imagine how much easier obedience would be if you truly did not care what other people thought, except for the Father. Now, I want to be real careful because I don't want to leave you with another to-do, because I don't think that's what Jesus is trying to do here. And the other to-do would be, don't give in public, go give in secret. So now you have another to do. I gave you one more performance to manage and one more standard to fail. And that's not the message here. The good news of this passage is not finally about your giving, it's about His giving. So look at the life of Christ next to this text. You see the man who lived it perfectly. He was forever slipping away to pray by himself. He healed people and told them, don't tell anybody I did this. He had every right to trumpet who he was. He was the glory of God walking around in body, and he spent 30 years in a backwater town, and not only did nobody clap, they said, that guy is who? A prophet has no reward in his own country. And then the cross came. Think about it. The greatest act of righteousness in history of the universe happened in what looked like total defeat. The crowd saw failure. They saw nothing to applaud in the cross. They saw a man stripped, shamed, hung between two criminals, abandoned, finished. And the glory of that moment was hidden underneath what looked like a worthless moment, a wasted life. There was no applause at Calvary. There was a lot of mockery. He gave everything he had to an audience of one, to the Father. The world saw nothing of value, but the Father not only saw what was happening on the cross, the Father saw in secret what the crowd couldn't see at all, and He rewarded the Son in the resurrection. That's what the resurrection represents, is the reward. And now Christ, seated at the right hand, given the name above every name, the reward came in full from the only one who saw what finally counted. And the entire point of this text you don't give in secret in order to get your Father to accept you. You give in secret because in Christ the Father has already accepted you. The applause you've chased your whole life, the approval, the sense of that you're finally going to be seen, finally be enough, He has already spoken over that and dealt with in the Son. The account settled, paid in full, yes, but not by you, by Jesus, on your behalf. So your obedience doesn't flow uphill towards a God you're trying to win. It flows downhill from grace that's already yours. The thing is when we think about rewards, what do we think about? We think like gold, silver, crowns, all that kind of stuff. But the reward's not about getting things from God. Ultimately, the reward is God. A relationship with God. His pleasure, His approval, fellowship with Him, that's the reward. So I'm going to end where we started. When you do something genuinely good and no one on earth knows you did it, it's still worth doing. Because it's not wasted. Your Father sees the whole thing. He always does. And an audience of one, when that one is the Father in heaven, is not a smaller audience. It's the only audience. It's the only audience you'll never, ever need. Amen? Amen. Let's pray.